Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
A couple things this afternoon. First, I'll give some remarks later this week that are consistent with what we've been working on for my entire time here in the Indo-Pacific. I'll be speaking to a group of Indian business leaders in preparation for the trip that I'll take in a couple weeks, where I'll be visiting India, an important part of President Trump's strategy in the Indo-Pacific. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity both to give the set of remarks about how it is our relationship is so closely tied economically, but also importantly, the things that the United States and India can continue to do to build out what is an incredibly important relationship for both countries. I thought, too, I'd spend just a minute here talking about the agreement that was reached with the United States and Mexico on Friday of last week. Frankly, it reflects diplomacy at its finest. It shows the enduring strength, too, of the relationship between our two countries, and it's a significant win for the American people. The deal continues the Trump administration's commitment, the strongest by any administration in history, to confront the tide of illegal immigration and many other problems along our southern border, including the drug trafficking issues that transit there. The president is doing precisely what he said he would do. We agreed to a number of things, including the placement of 6,000 Mexican National Guard along the Mexican southern border. It's the biggest effort to date that the Mexicans made, and something that we pressed for with them throughout the time of the negotiations. We'll work closely with them to make sure that that is a successful effort. Those crossing the U.S. southern border to seek asylum will be rapidly returned to Mexico, where they may await their adjudication of their asylum claims. We've seen this before. We were able to do this to the tune of a couple of hundred people per day. We now have the capacity to do this full throttle and engage this in a way that will make a fundamental difference in the calculus for those deciding to transit Mexico to try to get into the United States. This full-blown effort under the migration protocols is a big deal, and was something that we worked on very diligently with our Mexican counterparts over 2 days. And we'll pursue other cooperative efforts, too. For much of last week, Foreign Secretary Berard and his team were excellent partners in all of this. We worked alongside them with our team here at the State Department. I've seen some reporting that says that these countless hours were nothing, that they amounted to a waste of time. I can tell you that the team here at the State Department believes full-throatedly that this is an important set of agreements, important set of understandings, one that we'll continue to work on, because in the end, we'll be measured by the outcomes that we deliver with respect to stemming the flow of illegal immigration into our country. I want to, on that note, repeat my personal gratitude to Foreign Secretary Berard and his team. They worked hard. They were diligent. They defended the Mexican people. I think we made both of our countries proud with this agreement. I spoke to President Trump not too long ago about this. He is grateful to everyone who made this happen, and he had a chance to speak with President Obrador about this as well. As I mentioned, this isn't the end of the road. We've got a lot of work to do to implement what we've agreed to, not just in the joint declaration, but the approach to the region for Central America that we agreed to last December. And we have full confidence, as President tweeted yesterday, that Mexico will fulfill its shared commitments. We'll continue to work with Mexico to discuss migration and asylum issues, and if necessary, we'll take additional measures that the Mexican government agreed to during these conversations as well. I look forward to great cooperation between our two countries, and with that, I'm happy to take a couple of questions.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Secretary.
Hi.
Can you explain what in this agreement was different than what was discussed between Secretary Nielsen and the Mexican governments in December, the agreement that people have been talking about? And in addition, is there a separate agreement with the Mexican government than what was announced Friday, as the president has suggested on Twitter? And both sides have said if there's not enough progress, we're going to come back to the table and reevaluate. How are you measuring that? What kind of metric are you going to use? Is there a specific number or target you need them to hit?
Sure. So I was part of those conversations in Houston in December when the original migrant protocols were put in place. The scale, the effort, the commitment here is very different from what we were able to achieve back in December, and frankly wouldn't have happened. The entire team from the Mexican government that came up because the president had raised the specter of 5% tariffs on their products. It's what prompted this series of conversations that took on a level of seriousness and a timed commitment that we were committed to getting done before the weekend. And so it's a fundamentally different commitment about doing this across the entire border at scale. You see the numbers in the several thousand per day. Those are the folks that will now be subject to the migrant protocols and will be, when appropriately adjudicated, returned to Mexico to await their asylum hearings inside of Mexico. As for other agreements, there were a number of commitments made. I can't go into them in detail here, but each side was committed to a set of outcomes. The United States retained its ability to use its own determination of whether there was success along the border. You saw that the announcement was that the president would indefinitely suspend the tariffs. That means if it's the case that we're not making sufficient progress, that there's risk that those tariffs will go back in place. And as we had these conversations with my foreign secretary, my counterpart Marcelo, we both understood that. It means that we've got hard work to do over the coming days and weeks to deliver on those actual outcomes on the ground along our southern border. I know the Mexican government's committed to it, and I know that not only the State Department, but DHS and all the others who have real responsibility that will deliver this. I'm confident that this hard work will we will go hand in hand to make this deliverable, something that we can all say, yep, this resulted from what we did last week.
And is there a metric that you're going to use to judge that? Like, how will you decide how much progress or if enough progress has been made?
We will evaluate this literally daily.
Mr. Secretary, good afternoon. What do you think about other countries, such as Brazil and Panama, helping with this? Are you talking to them about perhaps backing up Mexico in its efforts to stem this migration, given that it's... And again, coming to my colleague's question, how much time are you prepared to give this to make sure that it's actually working?
Yeah, so I can't answer the second question. Some amount of time. This won't be instantaneous. It won't happen today, but the work has already begun. So I don't know. The agreement, we talked about 90 days, but I imagine that we'll know the effectiveness, the ability of us to work together to deliver this much more quickly than that. Perhaps a month, perhaps 45 days. We'll have a good sense of whether we're able to achieve these outcomes in the way we're hoping that we can. As for other countries, yes, we're going to work with the Central American countries too. A good deal of the folks who are transiting into our country are coming through Mexico and are not originally from Mexico. And we have high expectations they'll deliver as well. We have teams that will be working there this week to get agreements with those countries to put the onus where it is for them to make sure that that their citizens are not the ones transiting through Mexico into the United States.
Sir?
We'll take one more.
Okay. EDC?
Just to follow up on that, in the agreement it says the United States and Mexico will lead in working with regional and international partners to build a more prosperous and secure Central America. But there have been steps to cut aid to Central America. So I'm wondering how that fits and whether you're committing resources, not just sort of negotiations to this. Are you going to put money into it or expertise?
Yeah, I think you've conflated economic prosperity with U.S. dollars going down to those places. I don't think about them that way remotely. Those economies need to grow. They need to develop rule of law. They need to develop systems. They need to grow their economies. The United States is prepared to do the things we need to do, but we've made no incremental resource commitments associated with this deal. We didn't offer any resource assistance to the Mexican government to deliver these outcomes. We've not done so in Central America as well, where we find it in our interest in the Northern Triangle or in Mexico to provide resources that make sense to protect the American people. We'll do that. But in the first instance, these nations have the responsibility to take care of these immigration problems in their home country. Thank you all.
Okay, you're stuck with me for the rest of the briefing. Good morning or afternoon. We've got several things to start this off today for all of you, so just be patient with me, please, as we get through them. Okay, first, on Friday, the U.S. Treasury designated Iran's largest petrochemical holding group, Persian Gulf Petrochemical Industries Company, and its network of 39 subsidiary petrochemical companies and sales agents for supporting the IRGC, a designated foreign terrorist organization and WMD proliferator. We intend to target any company in the petrochemical sector or elsewhere that provides financial support to it. The maximum pressure campaign continues and will continue. Germany's Foreign Minister Heiko Maas is in Tehran. Japan's Prime Minister Abe will be there this week as well. There is no daylight between us and our allies on the objective of denying Iran the ability to ever acquire a nuclear weapon. We also agree about the threat of Iran's ballistic missile program, its terrorist activities, and human rights abuses. Iran has threatened to violate some of the JCPOA's key restrictions, and today Zarif threatened the U.S. that it cannot expect to stay safe because of our maximum pressure campaign. Making threats, using nuclear blackmail, and terrorizing other nations is typical behavior for the revolutionary regime in Tehran. Tomorrow, they will probably threaten once again to close the Strait of Hormuz. We aren't impressed. Iran faces a simple choice. It can either behave like a normal nation or watch its economy crumble. Iran's recent threat to cease performing key nuclear commitments under the JCPOA is a big step in the wrong direction, and it underscores the continuing challenge Iran poses to international peace and security. The international community must remain united on this issue and hold the Iranian regime accountable for its threats to expand its nuclear program. We will hold the Islamic Republic of Iran accountable for any actions against our people and our interests, regardless of whether they come from Iran or from its proxies. The only solution is a new and better deal that addresses the full scope of Iran's threats. Those threats form the basis of the 12 demands. As President Trump and the Secretary have said, we stand ready to talk. Iran's leaders know how to reach us. Next, the United States expresses its grave concern about the Hong Kong government's proposed amendments to its Fugitive Offenders Ordinance, which, if passed, would permit Chinese authorities to request the extradition of individuals to mainland China. The peaceful demonstration by hundreds of thousands of Hong Kongers yesterday clearly shows the public's opposition to the proposed amendments. The United States shares the concern of many in Hong Kong that the lack of procedural protections in the proposed amendments could undermine Hong Kong's autonomy and negatively impact the territory's long-standing protections of human rights, fundamental freedoms, and democratic values, as enshrined in the Basic Law and the Sino-British Joint Declaration. We are also concerned that the amendments could damage Hong Kong's business environment and subject our citizens residing in or visiting Hong Kong to China's capricious judicial system. Last month, the Secretary met with a delegation of pro-democracy leaders from Hong Kong to discuss their broad reservations about the extradition proposal. We believe that any amendments to the Fugitive Offenders Ordinance should be pursued with great care and in full consultation with a broad range of local and international stakeholders who may be affected by the amendments. The continued erosion of the one country, two systems framework puts at risk Hong Kong's long-established special status in international affairs. Moving over to Georgia, Secretary Pompeo will meet with the Georgian Prime Minister, who is visiting Washington this week. Ahead of this meeting, I would like to highlight that the United States does not recognize the legitimacy of the so-called parliamentary elections in Georgia's South Ossetia region on June 9th, and it will not acknowledge their outcome. Our position in South Ossetia remains clear. These regions are integral parts of Georgia. Accordingly, we reiterate our strong support for Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. The Secretary looks forward to discussing a range of bilateral issues with the Prime Minister tomorrow. Finally, I have one more announcement for you. I'm pleased to announce that Secretary